Welcome back to Cheney's War Room, the show that the CDC describes as terminal and whose radio signal proves that there is no intelligent life.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
This is the second episode of Cheney's War Room, and while everything is as fast and loose as the Senate's rules on insider trading, I'd like to clear something up about the nature of this podcast. This podcast is not neutral. It has a narrative and an opinion, and if you haven't picked up on that, you will probably notice it in this episode. If you want the illusion of unbiased neutrality, go listen to The Daily, or better yet, nothing at all. With that said, though, I won't be using weird alternative sources. I'll try to stick to your mainstream publications, New York Times, Washington Post, and so on. And everything I talk about will be right out in the open, just maybe with a different spin than your MSNBC. Alright, I think we're ready to move to the topics that I want to talk about. The first is about Joe Biden, and the various responses to coronavirus on the federal and legislative side, where I'll be joined by a friend of mine who worked with Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. Now, even though there is a global pandemic going on, there's also a Democratic primary that for some reason has not yet been suspended. And as of recording right now, Wisconsin is holding its primary on the 7th, because the Democratic Party is a death cult and mail-in voting would force us to use our postal infrastructure we don't pay for. But in any case, if you pay attention at all to this sort of thing, you will know that Joe Biden has slipped into the lead. However, you may not have heard of Tara Reade. See, about a week ago, The Intercept, an online news publication, dropped a story about a sexual harassment allegation against Biden from a staffer that worked with him in the Senate. To begin, this by all accounts is a credible allegation that by any normal paradigm of America's 24-hour media would be plastered all over headlines. But there is also a more likely than not chance you have not heard about this. In the week since it was first reported, Reade appeared on multiple podcasts, and hashtag IBelieveTara and Tara Reade trended number 1 on Twitter for days in a row. Yet barely any mainstream coverage has come of it. As of recording, no New York Times, no Washington Post, no CNN, no MSNBC articles on it. The publications that most Americans get their headlines from, and who are supposed to report everything, have been completely silent. Now, I'm not going to get into the actual details of Reade's stories. I don't feel comfortable or qualified to do that, so I'm just going to link the full transcript of her allegation in the description of whatever platform you're on. I instead want to cover the fallout and the attempted ignoring, it's not even attempted, its precise and calculated refusal to acknowledge a major scandal of the probable Democratic nominee. To make sure we are clear on the aspects of this allegation, it is not some crackpot allegation from left field. It is similar, if not identical in a vacuum, to the Blasey Ford case against Brett Kavanaugh. Both stories came to light because the alleged man was running for public office. Both stories were told to elected representatives. Both stories were retold in authentic detail and have witnesses to the original allegations. Further, both cases are against men who have passed sexual allegations against them. Biden has 8 sexual harassment allegations outside of Reade. In summary, if you believed Ford's case on its merits, you should also believe Reade's case. Okay, knowing that the Ford and Reade cases are nearly identical, we can ask the question we all already know the answer to. Why did Ford's case get unlimited press time and coverage while Reade gets nothing? Well, because Reade's case hurts a Democrat. It hurts the candidate that moderates see as their savior against Trump. And witnessing liberal hypocrisy is nowhere more prevalent than in the responses to this allegation. And while there hasn't been responses in the media, there is sure a lot online. Liberals who said believe women and pushed the Me Too movement during Kavanaugh, rightfully so, are now either silent or actively trying to poke holes in Reade's story. Hell, Simone Sanders, a top advisor to Biden, deleted all of their tweets supporting Blasey Ford. This isn't even the most disgusting response to this. These same people have dug into Reade's past to find their past political positions. I read a 4-page Medium article that used Reade's past article she wrote to try and forward that she's a Russian asset. But let's acknowledge what moderates on Twitter want us to know, even though it does not matter. Tara Reade has indeed held problematic political positions, some of which that I don't agree with, but those, and I cannot emphasize this enough, do not matter. See, understand this from an argumentative standpoint. If you choose to attack the character of the accuser and not the accuser's case, whether you subconsciously realize it or not, you are making the argument that if the allegations are true, it is okay because the victim is a problematic individual. Because let's play this out. Reade can be a Russian asset and has been raped by Joe Biden. Those are not mutually exclusive. So in the liberal hypothetical, is what Joe Biden did now okay? The correct answer for those keeping score at home is no. No, it's not. It does not matter what one's opinions on Russia are. They are still a human being that is capable of being a victim of rape. And if you are one of those liberal-minded people who told folks to believe women with Blasey Ford and you don't do that now, congratulations. You have proved that you don't believe in anything and you're willing to be a rape apologist if it's against your candidate. Also, if you are rightfully outraged over the suppression of Ford's case, you should be even more enraged now, because the people suppressing Ford were the Republicans, which is bad, but not at all surprising. We all know Republicans are horrible people that don't care about women or humans in general, whereas here, it's the entire media base suppressing Reade. Also, for the conspiracy theorists out there, this one's probably too obvious to you, but there is a bit more to the story. Reade first went to an organization called Time's Up, which is an activism firm formed after Weinstein to give women a platform in the face of workplace discrimination and sexual harassment. This organization, who Reade went to in January, kept her on the line until February when they finally said they won't support her or give her a platform, because Joe Biden is a candidate for federal office. But it is also worth noting that the managing director of the PR firm that represents the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund is Anita Dunn, who also just happens to be the top advisor to the Biden campaign. I also want to hit on the other arguments that rape apologists are making. First, and my favorite, is that Reade is biased because she was first a Warren supporter and now a Bernie supporter. And she is, and she did initially reach out to Warren before she went to Time's Up. But what if your rapist was running for president? Would you not support their opposition? The second argument is that by bringing up this allegation right now, it will hurt Biden's chances against Trump. And there are two ways that I see to look at this. One, Trump did fine running as an open rapist. The DNC is just doing the only way to beat a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, line of logic, but with sexual assault. Or two, that this will severely damage him, which is the real answer here. It will. Democrats as a party like to pretend to be in favor of an inclusive society and restorative justice. And whenever they're obviously not, they get made fun of, and it hurts them. Hell, in 2016, Trump got all of Bill Clinton's accusers to join him up on stage at a rally. He'll just do it again. So they are right. It will hurt Joe Biden in the polls, but this is actually the best time for it to come up. We are still in an active primary. Democrats have a chance to switch from the senile candidate who worked with segregationists, supported the Iraq War, wants to take away healthcare in the middle of a global pandemic, and is now also a rapist, to someone who is not all that. I mean, read the writing on the wall. A recent Washington Post poll put only 24% of Biden supporters enthusiastic to vote for him, while 53% of Trump's voters are. Clinton had 36% in 2016, and she lost. Biden will lose to Trump. The only uncertainty is how big the landslide will be. Because I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to be happy about going out to go vote for a rapist. And I sure as hell won't lift a finger for him in the general, or try to convince anyone to vote for him. Alright, that is all on Joe Biden, so that's the end of this stuff. When you hear me next, I'm going to be using a different microphone, and I'm going to be sitting down and talking to Ethan Eisner about the coronavirus response. Alright, welcome back. I am now joined by Ethan Eisner, who worked as an intern for Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. We're going to talk about the coronavirus response and what is being done and what should be done. Ethan, how does it feel to be the first ever guest on this show?
It feels pretty amazing, actually. I've actually wanted to do some type of podcast for a while.
Oh, cool. Is there anything else about yourself you would like to introduce that I missed out on?
So the other thing that I do besides, interning actively and working actively to make political change is I work with an organization that I founded called Common Ground, whose goal is to bring politics and civics to youth of all different political backgrounds. So the organization is obviously nonpartisan. I have my own beliefs, but if you think that we should be bringing, change to
good change,
to just the political system across the board, Common Ground is an interesting place to check out.
Cool. Awesome. All right. You ready to move into the wonderful, fun topic of COVID-19?
Sure.
All right. As you probably know, I know you know, the Senate recently passed a $2 trillion economic relief bill, which gives about $1,200 for people aged 16 and up. Do you have anything you really want to say on this? Or rather, what's your take on this? Is it as good as it is?
I mean, I don't think it's as much relief as people need. Like, even at the level like, if we're talking about what this really is, like, it's sort of a pseudo universal basic income, except like so small that it's nearly meaningless. Like, I think it might do something for a few people to make it at least somewhat better in terms of sort of padding the fall. But that being said, like, even at the level of $1,000 a month, the reason a universal basic income worked is that it wasn't enough to really supply the people with everything. So they still had to work, but like, if they hit crisis, it gave them something. At the
Also, a
level of
UBI
1,000,
is a reoccurring, so it's not just once.
yeah. So it's that it's both that it's reoccurring, but on top of that, it's that it's barely enough to support anyone. $1,200 does not enough. Also, like, people, if they don't have enough saved and can't work, $1,200 might mean a little bit in terms of buying some food, but they might still lose their houses and their rent. I think the better thing that needs to be done here, which Oregon Governor Kate Brown did, is pass some moratorium on evictions,
Hmm.
because people can't pay their rent right now. And yes, it sucks for the landlords, but no one really has the ability to do much of anything right now. And if you do, you're sort of lucky, but most people don't have that opportunity. And so $1,200 in most parts of America is going to mean nothing.
Yeah. It's also important to note for any college-age people who view this show, if you are claimed as a dependent under your parents' taxes, which you probably are, you're not going to get this money, which is very, very bad because you may be in a good situation, but many college-age people are still claimed as dependents, and many of them are not really truly dependents in actual definition. So this bill contains no real relief for college kids who just got laid off, maybe, and they still need to pay for both rent and tuition. But on that also, did you also notice last week how the federal gov also gave 1.5 trillion to stop the stock market for crashing for like 30 minutes? And then like 2 weeks, and then like a week later, gave them another trillion after that.
I definitely saw that. I mean, it made sense more at the time. Like, I think it was to some degree the right thing to do if we hadn't known that we were going to like have the entire country essentially be out of work. The thing
Yeah.
is, we should have known that and sort of did know that. So, I mean, yeah, nothing's really going to stop the stock market from crashing. Like, at this point, unless we spend like our entire budget for the rest of our future, it's not going to stop the stock market from crashing. And the thing about the stock market, other than that, is that the stock market, well, it to some degree affects like us in terms of prices of stuff. Like, most people who don't have that much money aren't going to be speculating in the stock market.
Just for
Uh,
reference, I have the statistic right next to me. 10% of Americans, the richest 10% of Americans, own 84% of all the stocks. So
and yeah, again, that makes sense. Most people, that's sort of starting to change with things like penny stocks and micro stocks and stuff, but not really. Most people don't have the money or the knowledge to really even uh or be able to actively participate in the stock market. So, like, yes, it's important in terms of not having everything around us crash, and the stock market does affect us. Like, everyone goes, we shouldn't care about what the stock market does because it affects no one, and that is a misconception, right? it does affect us. At the same time, though, the thing that affects us more is us being able to actually have a sustainable income, and on top of that, to actually stimulate the stock market more is to have, yeah, like if we're talking about this as someone who's just like, oh, we need to just focus on the stock market, right? What helps it more is having people who can buy shit.
Yeah, because as it turns out, the actual forces that make our economy work and allow people to buy shit, as you say, and allow civilization to still be a thing, is not actually the stock market or large corporations or massive amount of billionaires in a country. Turns out it's just the grocery store employees, hospital workers, and garbage collectors. Those that allow civilization and our economy to be a thing.
Yeah. And again, right, it turns out, and even if you're someone who's like, well, the big corporations matter, which there's definitely an argument to be made there, but still, to make those corporations do well stock-wise, economically wise, you still need to have people who are able to buy stuff. And so it seems like that's the more important thing, is to increase the purchasing power of individuals so that, both we don't see the stock market changing, but, or I mean, it will change, but then also economically, like, that's going to make our economy much more strong than if we just inject money into the stock market. So I get it as a gut response. At the same time, I don't think it was ever the right thing to do. I think the right thing to do was to help the people who were impacted.
Yes, exactly. Because not only do the people need bailouts, but these corporations have also asked for bailouts, like the United Airlines and the entire cruise industry, and as we're talking about, the stock market. Because apparently these large industries that were quote unquote too large to fail need complete bailouts after like a week of reduced profit. So it's nice to know that the free market is working just as intended after one tiny little hit to everything. Shall we move away from the stock market and economics
Sure.
to rail on some GOP governors?
hmm
What do you think about 8 GOP governors saying they won't do shelter in place?
I mean, again, I think that it's not a good thing. You know, there's definitely been a decent amount of fake news promulgated around sort of GOP local news circles, or more conservative leaning local news and talk shows for certain. But let's not forget that many governors across the board who are GOP are standing together with everyone else across the country and saying this is the right thing to do. Governor John Kasich, or not John Kasich now, the successor to John Kasich in Ohio, they were one of the quicker people, or quicker states, to have this shelter in place. They postponed the primaries there. There wasn't even, I don't think, that much shelter in place across the country. So
Speaking on the primaries thing, just for a sec, because I also did this in the prior recording of the show. Today's the 5th right now. Wisconsin's still holding its primary in 2 days.
yeah, that is a really terrible idea.
That's gonna go great, isn't it?
That is like, okay. To be honest, when this first happened, jokingly, me and my friends were like, "Oh, it might defeat Biden because Bernie has the younger vote, and the younger people will be the ones going to the polls because the older people don't want Corona." Not sure if that's gonna happen, but like,
I think old people just love to vote.
yeah. So that's just gonna be really terrible. And they might vote for Biden and then get infected with Corona and die.
Yes.
So
Talk
I
about
think
voters'
it's
remorse.
honestly the worst thing. The only way I could see it happening is vote by mail, but the only place that really has that is Oregon. So
Yes, because our country does not fund our postal infrastructure.
like we're sort of screwed in that regard. You know, that's it's going to be the worst thing just in general. Like, you can try to social distance, but it's not going to work.
You can't social distance in a polling line.
Yeah. Like, if you had everyone stand 6 feet away from the next person, that line might go miles.
The lines are already long enough. Because,
Literal
yeah.
miles, though.
So, yeah, the primary should be postponed or suspended or something. Or just do voting by mail. It's just...
Well, no, the thing that I think is the worst is that the Democratic establishment says that you need to finish primaries by June 5th or something like that.
The DNC right now is pretty much just like a death cult. I have never seen any other political party like so ready just to march its followers to death.
I just don't understand it, to be completely honest. Like, it doesn't seem to suit their interest, like, except for maybe having a candidate earlier. But, like, no one's paying attention to what's happening in Democratic or Republican politics right now, for that matter. People are paying attention to the coronavirus. Like, I'm not sure if you saw it, but recently, Trump just swept under the rug, like, a lot of deregulation of environmental standards, and he could only do that because of the coronavirus. So, I think having a candidate earlier is really not going to do anything, unless the coronavirus is over, which maybe having very large groups of people together won't help.
Yeah, I think that's a good hypothesis. Okay. So finishing up on the corona stuff, let's move into a hypothetical. You and I, both of our administrations were just elected, and you are now president. What are the first decisions you were going to do as president? Or rather, what should your administration do to stop something like this, or to quell the spread?
So, yeah, I think the two most important things actually aren't something that would have even happened surrounding Corona, but the preparedness. So first, I think having the pandemic unit still instated would have been very important. I mean, emergency preparedness doctors have been predicting something like this would happen for years. I have a friend whose parents, or at least one of their parents, are an emergency preparedness virologist, who essentially was not surprised in the slightest that this happened, because they've been expecting a pandemic on this level to happen around right now. The second thing that's also important is having the unit of the CDC that was in China still there. Obama's administration specifically put a unit of the CDC into China because that's where many of the last outbreaks of large proportion had been happening. SARS and a few other stuff that could have possibly risen to pandemic level, luckily didn't. All originated in China. So the CDC had some idea that whatever the pandemic was, it might, or it would at least likely originate in China. Not that it's a Chinese virus, because it's not, and that's purely a conjecture of racism, but that it originated there. And so having that unit there to give us some type of early warning, because the World Health Organization really wasn't able to get in to understand what was going on at the beginning. Let's not forget, China's an authoritarian regime. You might have just seen. There's a few articles that say that China underreported the numbers of coronavirus patients, which makes perfect sense, as for a very long time they were just like rising by 19 patients a day, which doesn't add up for China in any way, shape, or form. So I think both having the pandemic response team and then also having the unit of the CDC in China are the two most important things. If we go to more immediately, though, I think having a shelter in place order much more quickly, or at least some type of executive resolution that says you should do this. I don't think the president technically has the power to just tell everywhere to shelter in place, but having at least some type of resolution probably makes it pretty clear to everyone pretty quickly that we should be sheltering in place. So I think having that much more quickly and then giving some type of buffer period solves a lot of these problems we're seeing now with people just being left out of work instantly, So, it happens so suddenly. And I think that also caused a lot of turmoil for a lot of people who were employed and now are completely out of work with, yes, $1,200 of dispensation from the federal government, but not nearly enough. So I think I would also definitely have have much more financial backing in a way that actually helps people and something more regular, certainly, because we know that this is going to go on for a decent bit of time. $1,200 is not going to cut it for the vast majority of people in this country. It's just not. Um, and then there's a few. One is the president has emergency powers to order certain businesses and corporations to mass produce products in times of emergencies. War Powers Act, which weirdly enough allows for the president to work with pandemics, even though it's not a war, but ordering certain companies beyond Just Ford, which is the only one the president ordered to create masks, but ordering many companies to mass produce both masks and ventilators. Now, it is true, ventilators are going to take a long time to make, but at least preparing months before this, or having them in the first place. I think the other important thing is in the US, we legitimately don't know how many ventilators we have. We just don't. So I think something sort of going back earlier is like knowing how many ventilators we have. Like that just seems common sense. And I think the final thing we do, if we still are in this situation, if we still don't have enough ventilators, is really to work on what some doctors had said, which is to make one ventilator work for 3 or 4 people. I think that's vitally important. I think also starting work on the vaccine much sooner, because we're working on it to some degree, but we're pretty much, you know, not anywhere near it. And we might be quarantined for even past the summer, based on how long it will take to make a vaccine, because we hadn't been preparing for it enough. So I think those are the things I would personally do if I was running an administration in this time of crisis.
I have a list to further on from this. I have a list in front of me of policy decisions that I wrote down for this, and I was thinking we could just go through them and talk about them.
Sure.
Things that could be taken care of. The first one is the one you talked about. We institute again the War Powers Act. All necessary companies go and manufacture either PPE, personal protection equipment, or and ventilators, and then redistribute those as necessary. I don't think we need to hit on that too hard. You already talked about it. Two, all privately vacant hospitals or necessary convertible buildings will be seized and converted. My example for this is right now, I don't know if you're aware, in Philadelphia, there is a vacant hospital building in downtown in the center of the city. It is currently vacant because the owner of it is demanding a $1 million lease per month, and the city can't afford that. That hospital could probably save tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives, not just by treating people, but just by stopping the spread. You are the U.S. government. Just seize it. Use it.
I mean, I think that makes sense to some degree. Yes, seize it. I think $1 million is ludicrous. There probably should be some type of dispensation to the owner.
Oh, of course. But at the same time...
at that level, that's ludicrous.
Yeah. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of lives is more important than one landlord's lease.
I think the lives are more important. I do think that there should be some type of pay, although given just how little we're paying everyone just in general, I'm not sure it should have to be that significant, especially not to the level of $1 million.
No. Okay. 3. All necessary hospitals will be subsidized and rooms given to homeless folk. I saw an image recently and a news article I read about in Las Vegas right now. It was a parking lot that's been painted over and painted into 6x6 squares, so houseless folk could sleep and still have social distancing. Also noteworthy, there's nobody in Las Vegas right now. All of the hotels are empty. Just subsidize the rooms and give them to people, and get people off the streets.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen the statistic in general that says that there's enough vacant houses in this country to house every person who doesn't have a house three or four times over. So we have the space to do it, and I think right now it's especially important. Like, forget about solving homelessness in general. Like, if you actually want to solve this crisis, you need to work with homeless people and most importantly, to some degree. I think the other thing is there's so many vacant buildings in general that aren't even necessarily housing, but Cedar Hills Crossing in Portland, most of that mall, all the businesses are just gone, right? There's a few businesses that are there, but most are gone. And there's just space that could be used to house one or two people, but it's enough space. And if you use sort of segmented spaces across, large swaths of area, it can really do a large amount to help people. But I think more than that, the other thing is there is some cities that are actively sort of destroying areas that were used by homeless people in a way that was the most safe that they could have used for their situation. I was actually talking to someone from Las Vegas for last night, or I was talking to someone from Las Vegas last night, and they were saying that the city made it illegal for homeless people to sleep in these tunnels under the city that were essentially the best shelter in Las Vegas for homeless people, because Las Vegas, I'm not sure if you know, has a very large homeless problem, but is not doing too much about it. And she was saying that the government just essentially said, now you can't sleep here, to people who sometimes had been sleeping in these tunnels for 10, 20 years and had no other place to turn. And then the city gave them no alternative for any shelter place to sleep. So, I think the other thing is actively taking away shelter doesn't help.
100% agree. The next is something we also talked about, you talked about, is just some type of countrywide stay-at-home order. Like you said, I don't think the president has this power, but we can institute something either through Congress or Senate, pass some resolution to get that to happen. Yeah, it's necessary. People need to do it. I saw a headline recently or rather like a week ago, a headline that the Mississippi governor was not going to do shelter in place. And then like 3 days after that, another headline saying Mississippi was one of the fastest growing states for confirmed cases. So shelter in place.
Gee, I wonder why.
I wonder why. That one's a real mystery. A $2,000 stimulus to every U.S. citizen every month, just to expand on the Senate's recent bill.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I know that at the level 1,200 even a month isn't enough, but I think 2,000 is probably barely enough to cut it for most people who aren't
either in work or have been laid off or something.
Yeah, like
don't have an income. 6, all essential workers get full benefits and a living wage of at least $15. I don't think we have to talk too much about this because, like we specified before, and we talked about that. Hey, the things that actually keep our civilization afloat are actually the people manning gas stations and are serving you fast food and are the grocery and are the people that pick up your garbage. And they should, at least in all of this, who are being forced to work, at least be given full benefit.
I mean, I'm very grateful to everyone who has to work right now. And it seems weird, but by working, they're legitimately risking their lives every day.
Yes.
So I definitely agree with that. The other thing which I forgot to mention, actually, and I'm not sure if you're going to talk about this, is I think we need to have some type of way to work to track who coronavirus patients have had contact with based on cell phone records. that's what South Korea did, and that's essentially the only way they stem the spread to the best of their ability. I think at some point the U.S. companies probably would cooperate with the government to get that to happen, because it seems like something that would help a lot of people in the U.S. So I think starting that process earlier would have been important. Obviously, I don't think we can just compel companies to give up that information, because that is a blatant invasion of privacy and seizure of property. But I think also that at least trying to work with some of the major cell phone providers to uh, get
Just in
that
some way be able to
data.
track the spread, if anything, at the very least.
Yeah, we can track the spread and then figure out who had contact with people and get them tested.
Next, number 7 is med school students shall be graduated or released early to perform at the level they are proficient. Because right now we have so many med school students just on standby, and if you completed your 7 out of 8 years of med school, you are more than proficient to be able to perform, say, being a nurse's aide or something. And when we have hospitals where like a third of the staff is going out sick because they've been affected because they don't have proper PPE, we're going to need more people to be able to staff hospitals and provide care.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think that's very important. Oh, the one other thing I think is important that just came to mind is about testing kits. I think we should have started manufacturing testing much quicker,
Oh, yes.
because we still don't have enough tests. I was watching a live stream last night from someone who was in New York, who was pretty sure they had the coronavirus, and their doctor essentially told them, if the symptoms aren't bad, you should just stay home and get rest, because there's not enough tests.
We
So
should have been doing this a lot earlier, and companies should be manufacturing this now.
that should be probably another product that are is compelled to be manufactured.
And then next, massive federal funding to hospitals, clinics, meal services, schools, etc. The CDC testing. This is pretty standard. I mean, they need this more than Wall Street does right now.
Yeah.
So hospitals can actually afford to get like PPE and other equipment they need. And finally, the last one is to freeze rent, because that needs to be done. Because if we're not going to do an actual UBI or some type of stimulus to keep people afloat that have just lost their jobs or have been laid off, that still have to pay their rent, as most Americans have to, they need some type of money to do that, or just freeze the rent, which would be better.
Yeah,
And,
so I think again, like having a moratorium on evictions, I think I'd actually go farther than that and say that people can't be thrown out of their house because of late mortgage payment.
yes, that's all of my proposals. Do you have anything else to add?
Again, I think adding mortgage relief
Mm-hmm.
would be something important. And again, like I think a few governors have done this. Governor Kate Brown said that we're going to have a moratorium on evictions, which is incredibly helpful, because before that point, like evictions had been going up massively, massively in Oregon because of this.
Yeah.
So, there's that. But then, more than that, I think the other thing that really needs to be emphasized, and you briefly touched on this, is having the distribution of ventilators and masks be significantly better, just because right now states are duking it out to get those products. And a few states like Oregon have given ventilators to states that need them more than we do. But most states don't do that. It's just we want it so that we can be prepared, which is certainly understandable. But everyone doing that just means that states who have less economic resources don't get them, which seems pretty reprehensible at best.
I think if our administration did this, everything would look a lot better. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yes.
So, Ethan, we're about out of time here. So you can plug anything you want to here. Anything you want people to go check out, you're more than welcome to say.
Yeah. I think the one thing I'd like people to check out is, if you think that we should be having more conversations across the aisle, and trying to bring people closer together as humans instead of farther apart, because ultimately as humans we have more that brings us together than pushes us apart. Then go to Instagram and search common ground. One sec, let me look up the exact username so that I don't get it wrong, but it is common underscore ground underscore international. And on there we just have well thought out discussions about issues of public policy, and try to bring people together instead of pushing them apart. So if you have interest in that, or interest in political discussion in general, go check out Common Ground on Instagram.
Thank you so much for joining me, Ethan.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Okay, that is all for this week. I'd like to thank you for listening. I would like to thank Jaden Torsen Music for once again doing our great intro. You can find me on Twitter as just Porter Wheeler or at Doc Baddington, and you can find me on Instagram at Porter Wheeler. And you can reach out to me by mail by sending a 4x9 piece of cardboard with the words "stupid idiot" on it to Steve Bannon's P.O. Box. And I still don't know how to really end these things, so I'm probably just going to cut this after I finish this sentence.